Please stand for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you everyone for coming and those watching on TV. First order of business is a public hearing. Mr. Plate.
And this hearing is, there's a transcript of this hearing being prepared. Our court reporter is watching and listening via Zoom, so we'll go ahead and proceed. This hearing is called to order at 7:00 p.m. this 14th day of February 2022 at the Hermann City Hall. It is conducted to consider a request to rezone property owned by Hermann Village Investment Company and Kathleen Shandel and Adrian Segrist, consisting of 3 parcels, lots 1 and 2 of the Hermann Industrial Park, consisting of 13.156 acres. Part of lot 11 of the Hermann Industrial Park, consisting of 2.18 acres, and another parcel described by meets and bounds, consisting of 7.80 acres. The applicants request that these parcels be rezoned from I-2 Industrial to C2 Highway Commercial. The addresses of the properties are 165 100 East and 179 Highway 100 East. The Planning and Zoning Commission considered the application and upon motion duly made, seconded, and passed, voted to recommend that the Board of Aldermen approve these rezoning requests. This hearing is on the record and a transcript is being prepared. The property owners and/or others here among the public are invited to speak. And the following exhibits have been presented by the city's zoning office. Exhibit number 1 is an application to change zoning. Exhibit 2 is an affidavit of publication from the newspaper. Exhibit 3 is the notice of public hearing published in the newspaper. Exhibit 4 is the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes from January 19, 2022. Exhibit 5 is the zoning map for the city of Hermann, Missouri. And Exhibit 6 is the entire code of ordinances for the city of Hermann. Mayor Cox, do you agree to accept these exhibits into the record?
Yes, sir.
So are any of our applicants or anyone else here that would like to speak?
I can say that this came to light when Shandrell and Segrist put their property, which is the Alpenhorn, when they put that property up on the market. Potential buyers started calling City Hall inquiring about the proper usage of the property, and that's when we understood that it was really I-2 is what it was zoned. And so that is because it was originally part of the industrial park years ago and would have been, as it was being developed, probably was grandfathered in since zoning did not come into effect until 1995. And so now people were inquiring about not just continuing the use, but actually adding additional lodging. Therefore, it was time to get it cleaned up and get it zoned properly to C2, which of course would allow that use and basically, anything else, since it's right there on the highway, it's the least restrictive use. So planning and zoning, we discussed it with them before we even went forward with a public hearing, and they had no problems with it. And as you'll see in your minutes, they just passed it and recommended it without any questions.
Okay, is there anyone out there that has any comments or would like to speak? You all have any questions up here?
No.
Well, all we're doing is just correcting a past mistake.
Right.
I'm not even sure it was a mistake.
Well, oversight, I don't know, it's just.
Yeah.
It just was never rezoned after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the use of the property isn't going to change.
Right.
We're just correcting. So a clerical, whatever.
Okay.
You can ask for a motion if there's no more discussion.
I would move to approve the change.
I'll second.
Motion's made and a second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion's carried.
And that can conclude the record out there in Zoom land.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Mayor's report. Short as usual. First of all, the snow's been gone for a week or so. We got more coming this week. I wanted to publicly thank our street department and the city crews. I think they did I got a lot of messages that they did a really super job. And those guys work 12-hour shifts to try and keep the streets as clean as they can for us. So I just wanted to make a public thank you to them. Also, our city girls in the front office. You know, we have to be audited by law. And we just had a financial audit and the other audit and got 100% on both of them. So that's pretty outstanding. And we do that quite often. So we have a wonderful staff in the front office that are very thorough in what they do. And I would like to publicly recognize all of them for their hard work. And then on a personal note, I'd like to thank everyone. I'm going to get a little emotional on this one. For the thoughts and the prayers and the messages, all the offers to help while I was in the hospital and after being released. I am proof that prayers do work, because I was almost a number on the COVID list. I often say that if you live in Hermann, consider yourself blessed. Well, that statement means more to me now than it ever has. I just want to thank everybody for the support. Okay. Public Administrator.
Well,
Sorry for that, folks, but
Well, I think
it's been a ride.
and I think I speak for everyone when I say that we are so grateful that you are healthy and well and back at your post, and your absence was very much felt. So we are glad to have you back.
I got a ways to go, but at least I'm mobile now.
Yes,
you know.
that's right. So we had talked last couple of meetings about the natural gas prices, that they had been really holding steady this winter for the last 3 months. They were almost identical. So we finally hit our cold spell right in early February. That cold front moved into a large portion of the nation, and therefore it is going to drive up gas prices a little bit, and that will be reflected on the March bills. We had a great sales tax report again this month of February's deposits were $11,500 over and above the same month for last year. And I have attended a couple seminars, webinars lately regarding specifically for educating cities on all the different forms of state and federal funds that are coming down the pike. And there's a lot of balls in the air, and of course, first thing is the ARPA funds that we're dealing with, and then infrastructure bill will be rolling out money after that, and then potentially we'll see what becomes of Build Back Better. But each one of those things have their own allowable uses, guidelines, timelines, and reporting. So we are keeping our fingers on the pulse of those things to make sure that we can leverage all the funds that we can for the city. The meetings I've attended in the past couple weeks, the chamber board meeting, Tammy Bergerhoff and I have met with representatives from GROW, and we both attended the HRED meeting recently, and I have an NRPC meeting later this week. Tammy has actually been to Jeff City in the last 2 weeks for lobbying for funding for the Amtrak, for that second train. So as you know, they cut back that second train. And so she was asked to be a part of a small contingency that went up there, and they got to make a presentation to MoDOT's Transportation and Highways Commission, again lobbying for next year. Next year's budget, they were only putting in again for the second train for only 6 months. So they're lobbying to get those other 6 months back, and actually asked for a couple months yet for this fiscal year too, if they could squeeze something out of their budget. So she is very passionate in working on that. She actually helped initiate a committee, Amtrak Marketing Committee, and they have collaboratively purchased MoRiver.com, and they're working on web development, and I think you said MoDOT might help sponsor that. So she's hard at it trying to get our second train back in full force. Our new budget process is under the way, and we have all the new forms out, all the request forms out to all the department heads, and they will be looking at their budgets and we'll be crunching numbers, and they'll have all those back to me. They have a month to work on them and have them back to me in mid-March. And one last announcement is that Sheriff Eiler will be here at this meeting February 28th to present the law enforcement tax that will be on the April ballot and to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Public Work, Jesse?
So, as Bruce said, the street department guys, the parks department, the water and gas, some of my guys in the electric department all kind of chipped in. The vast majority was the street and the parks department. Todd did a phenomenal job managing this last snow, so my hat's off to him. That's probably the smoothest snow I've seen here in a long time, a real long time. They did real good. Right now, the street department's been doing a lot of spreader bed maintenance, things like that. They got another 50 tons of salt delivered, so Thursday we can put more salt down. Right now, they're doing some right-of-way maintenance on some streets, clearing some brush back and that sort of thing is fill-in time. Water and gas department, the water's been prepping stuff for the CTOL booster pump that's getting ready to be installed this spring. They got everything kind of prepped on the roadside, and then basically we're just waiting on some engineering for the building. The gas department has been doing some cleaning in the shop there to the point that I almost didn't recognize it when I walked in the other day. So the cold days are not being wasted. Parks department said kind of the same thing. They've been doing some maintenance at the bathrooms and stuff on the real cold days, doing some much needed touch-up stuff in the lower park bathroom, and we're going to be moving up to the rotunda bathrooms next. The electric department, we've been kind of doing much of the same. We've got our equipment testing and our truck testing done for the year already, so that's out of the way for our next MIRMA audit. And we replaced a pole the other week, had a pole that was dropped off, so we got a chance in some of the warm weather to get some line work done too. I sent you guys a memo on the dump truck and the Parks Department lighting. I'm going to run right after this. If you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
This stuff is already in the budget.
Yeah, everything was budgeted. Everything was actually, I think the park lighting came in like $200 over budget, I think. The dump truck was, I think, somewhere around $28,000 under budget, if I remember right.
We're at the lower part, will those lights go in?
They're probably going to start, we've got 2 more to put in the upper park, and then we'll probably start along the RV parking lot there and kind of around the pool.
Is that the last phase of the lighting project?
No, I think we got 2 more to go, but we've put off next year's. We've already kind of decided that. We're going to start banking some money for the ballpark lights. That's a much bigger need at this point, so we'll worry about those as we go. This was always kind of meant to be an as we had the money type of thing, and if we don't have it, then we'll do something different next year. So,
All right, any other questions?
69 line.
we have got, I actually got a letter today, well, Friday, from Mike Bax. It's got a written easement that they're wanting us to transfer onto the deeds. I don't remember. You're gonna have to forgive me on the legal stuff. That's out of my wheelhouse. But so basically, they've gave us a copy paste easement that they want us to put onto these deeds, and then hopefully we can move forward from there. But the ball's still rolling.
At the last meeting, we talked about that, about needing to prepare the actual easement deeds and transferring rights over to Central. And I thought Central's lawyer ought to send us whatever forms she wants to use to do that, because they do this all the time. And that's what Jesse's talking
Yeah,
about. So
and
we've got those now.
And so we will be hopefully attaching those in the next couple of weeks. I don't know what the timeline is on something like that. Obviously, all of this kind of took a little bit longer with the title company than we anticipated. In the beginning, they were thinking that we'd have all the title work done by, I think it was July, and it ended up being October 31st or something, or November. So we are a little bit behind on it, but we're still working on it. I actually have a meeting with Trish on it tomorrow morning, so the ball is still rolling.
Because this winter's about over, but there'll be another one.
Yes, there will. Yeah, and believe me, it hasn't been lost on me how close we've been on some of this ice that's missed us. So, and let's hope it misses us Wednesday. So,
Okay, thank you, sir.
alrighty, y'all have a good one.
Okay, we'll move on to ordinances. Dave?
Public, or public comment.
Do it. Oh, public comments, excuse me. We don't, we didn't have any,
I
right?
didn't have any speaker cards turned.
That's why I skipped it. I knew we didn't have any.
Yeah.
Okay, now we'll move on to ordinances.
The first for second reading, bill number 2022-03, an ordinance to provide that the city of Hermann, Missouri will participate in the 2022 Show Me Green Sales Tax holiday.
I move Bill 2022-03, second reading.
Motion's been made, second.
Second.
Motion's made and second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried.
Next is bill number 2022-09, an ordinance to amend ordinance number 2192 regarding the budget for fiscal year 2021-2022.
Any discussion? Entertain a motion?
I move Bill 2022-09, first reading.
Motion's been made. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Motion's made and second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. We need to read that second time.
It would be great if you would.
Bill number 2022-09, an ordinance to amend ordinance number 2192 regarding the budget for fiscal year 2021-2022.
Have a motion?
I'll move to approve bill number 2022, second read.
Motion's been made. Second?
Second.
Motion made and second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried.
Next for first reading, bill number 2022-10, an ordinance to approve a marketing consultant agreement between the city of Hermann, Missouri and Miranda Frederick.
Any discussion?
Do you need to talk to me about that, or you want me to?
Could Mark come up?
Come up to the podium, please.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Mark Deddens. I'm on the Hermann Arts Council, been a member for 2 years. Also, one of my primary responsibilities on the council is running the First Friday Art Walk that we do every day in spring, summer, fall, downtown. One of the things that we've been dealing with over the past couple of years, partially due to issues with shutdowns because of COVID, has been generating interest in our arts programs. Basically, we've had to upend and shorten part of the walk 2 years ago. And then this past year, trying to rejuvenate our list of participating artists has been difficult. In addition, we've had a number of issues with some of the other things, concepts and ideas that have been reduced by our inability to communicate on the internet. A lot of things that we've been doing in the past have been paper-based or trying to do advertising locally in other means. In talking with a lot of the local business folk and merchants in town here, it's become fairly evident that people who visit Hermann are utilizing the internet extensively to plan their weekends and to do things that are in their interest, what type of activities they want to participate in. I've discovered that a lot of our merchants link events onto their websites, and they have a lot of followers on social media, and we're not taking advantage of that. Also, in addition, we aren't getting a lot of new members, and we would like to be able to advertise not only events but memberships into the Arts Council, and also induce people to be more interested in the arts program by linking things that in the community that are important onto our social media, which at this point is extremely limited. In view of that, I've tried to recommend several different ideas to bring people on board who have interest in that thing, new members and people who have interest in social media. Also trying to get the high school to recommend internships, things like that. Those ideas have been limited. I've had very little success with getting an intern of any kind. And so at this point, my main interest is getting somebody on board that can really work with us to increase our presence. And for that point, I asked the city and got the opportunity to solicit for someone to work for us. We have selected based on the input from people who were interested. We selected one person who we'd like to hire. And I can brief you on her background if anyone is interested in that, but she is highly skilled in the...
We'll go with your recommendation.
Okay. Well, I really like to have somebody on board, and that's really what we're interested in.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay?
As liaison for the Art Council, they're really working hard to bring craftsmanship and artisans to Hermann. Maybe like cheese making and blacksmithing, and sewing and candle making and all those things. So I think they're going
Right.
to
I
help
think
us overall.
it's good.
Yeah, I mean, this is an excellent idea. I mean, Tammy and the tourism department have shown just how important getting on the internet and the web and social media is to anything. And our boards are slowly coming out of the stone age. The park board is currently getting ready to do it. I mean, I think it's a wonderful idea. I move Bill 2022-10 first reading.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? And we also need to do this a second time.
I think you want to get started as soon as possible, didn't you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, that'd be great.
Do it?
Yes, please.
Yes. Second reading, I'm sorry.
Bill number 2022-10 for second reading. An ordinance to approve a marketing consultant agreement between the city of Hermann, Missouri and Miranda Frederick.
Do I have a motion?
Move 2022-10, second read.
Motion's been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried.
Next for first reading is bill number 2022-11, an ordinance to approve an agreement with SAK Construction LLC for wastewater collection system rehabilitation.
Any questions or discussion on that?
Can she explain it a little? Could you explain it a little?
Sure, so this is just the contract for the bid that we approved at the last meeting for the Cured in Place pipe program, which is for the wastewater department, and instead of replacing pipe, they have a whole process for cleaning out the pipe and applying some sort of epoxy, and then they pull this big balloon through it to smooth it out, and so it resurfaces the pipe and extends its life for many years. And so, like I said, we approved the bid at the last meeting, and this is just the contract. And if we could read it twice, that would be fantastic.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion to approve bill number 2022-11.
Motion's been made.
Second.
Second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. Second reading.
Bill number 2022-11 for second reading, an ordinance to approve an agreement with SAK Construction LLC for wastewater collection system rehabilitation.
I move Bill 2022-11 second reading.
Motion's made. Second.
Second.
Motion's made and second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. Move on to resolution.
The resolution on for tonight, number 1315, a resolution to describe facts and reasons for a necessary amendment to the city's budget for fiscal year 2021-2022. And it seems redundant since we passed an ordinance, but there's a statute that says whenever you amend the budget, you should also pass a resolution to describe facts and reasons necessary. So we have this on the agenda.
Do I have a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Motion made and second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. Okay, we'll move on to old business. Old business is the ordinance to amend the code of ordinances of the city of Hermann, Missouri by adding the new code, chapter 670 for the food trucks. Have discussion on that? This is for discussion only?
I don't have any problems with the way this is written currently. It's not real, there's not a lot of constraints on anybody. There are regulations that need to be followed, but Unless you guys got something else in here, I looked through it pretty good, I couldn't find any real problems.
Do we have anything, we talked, it was near the end the last time, about how much space between them, or how many?
I think it allows for a 4-foot, make sure you can't walk the sidewalk, please.
Right.
No, but, and there's not anything in here in terms of if they're, say, end to end, how much should be in between each one.
I was not at the last meeting, but I did watch the one part that you guys discussed, the time limit on these things, and said you wanted them to quit at 10 o'clock, I think.
No, we changed it.
You changed that?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that.
No, it was
everything that I
explained,
read.
it makes perfect sense, that the reason for these is, there's no place to eat after town.
There you go, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank
I
you.
think we went 1 o'clock, didn't we have one?
Well, that's what originally, we never did come to a solution to the time of something.
Well, that's what I thought at that
discussed.
meeting, you didn't really, that's why
We
we
didn't narrow it down to a time frame.
It says 6 AM to 1.
Well, that was on the original.
Oh, okay.
Also.
So does there need to be a time? I don't really.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, you don't want them to go till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, but I'm just saying, when I was watching that, I was thinking that, well, you know, most of the restaurants are closing at 9. If it's a busy weekend on a Saturday, what's wrong with them staying open till 10 or 10:30, 11 o'clock, you know? Because a lot of times you still have a lot of walking traffic, especially downtown. And, you know, so, hey, let's get a burrito or whatever they're selling, you know? So I just feel that,
The 6 AM report, apparently there were gonna be some breakfast trucks.
well, 6 a.m.'s fine. I don't get up that early anymore, but yeah, that's fine, you know. I just, that was, just like I say, it wasn't here, so I just wanted to throw that
Does
out.
anybody have a problem with 1 AM?
I think 1 AM is awful late. I know that majority of the establishments that does sell intoxicating liquor do have food in them. And 10 o'clock, as Bruce mentioned, most of your restaurants close at that time, and 10 PM falls into where we want the outdoor music shut down.
So
I think-
people are walking home and,
I think 10 PM probably should be about the latest. If not, then we may tend to have intoxicated people just walk around on the street till 1 o'clock in the morning and.
If you feed them, they'll go to bed.
I think putting food in their belly isn't a terrible idea.
well, and I think the other thing you have to consider, if these food trucks are coming to town and they got there at noon, chances are they're not gonna stay till 10, 11 o'clock at night, because they're gonna either run out of food or be tired and want to go home. I mean, that's, you know, I don't know for sure, but, you know, I would think.
I would go with 11, but I think 10's too early.
You think 11?
Because we have, music has to be turned down by 10, and that's still an hour afterwards.
But that's outside, not inside.
It's past my bedtime, guys, I'm not out that late.
Or we meet in the middle at midnight.
Yeah.
That way it keeps it clean on the day of business that they're operating. I'm fine with
I would
that.
go for midnight.
I'm fine with
What's that?
I'd go for midnight.
Midnight?
that. That way it's clean, day of operation.
Okay, I'm good with that.
You good with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other changes?
So my question is B, I guess 11. Trish, we've spoken about this with, how do we prove that their sales tax is being collected by us? Or that they're paying sales tax to us? It kind of explains it there. Can you?
Yeah, we just talked about, it really depends on the volume, because they, the state tells them, sets the limits over how frequently they have to report in paying their sales tax. So if they're a food truck that's very active, then they could potentially have to report in maybe quarterly. But there's some, you know, I'm afraid I don't know those limits off the top of my head, but they may not show up except annually on the report. So we were discussing about how we could track that, and I said, well, we get a quarterly sales tax report, but they may or may not be on there based on their volume of sales.
Correct. Yeah, if they're small, they only have to report once a year.
But I guess on their application, we could have, you know, have them sign basically like some affidavit verbiage or something, Dave, maybe, saying that they are doing that.
Do they get a annual report back that they have filed? So upon registration, so here's what we paid our taxes or collected the sales tax the previous year. some way to
Well,
double
we have our
check.
no sales tax, that certificate of no sales tax due, when we renew business license every year, so that's something. So that's required when they get their business license.
So does this $25 fee cover all of the added work that your staff will have to do? Or does it need to be increased somewhat?
That's, I don't know, that's really up to you all. I mean, 25 is not a lot, a couple hours of work.
Yeah. And paper and supplies
Make it like $30 or,
and 50? I mean, this is for a full year. And then if they come mid-year, is it prorated?
We have not discussed that here, so I did not,
I'd like to see it higher.
I would think maybe like a scale where so many days in operation could be this figure and any, make a scale, volume or days frequency that they come. That would make more sense.
I wonder if they'll know that upon first,
That's true.
when they first apply. Maybe it could be like, at what point in the year, maybe like we used to do the old licenses.
Right, because you have the first quarter, second
Mhm.
quarter, third quarter,
Yeah,
fourth quarter.
prorated
used
based
to.
on quarter. Like if they don't come until mid-year, then they'd only pay, potentially half.
Why don't we make it 100
So 25 a
for
quarter.
a year?
25 a quarter.
That would, it's a lot easier way to figure it up, I can tell you that.
What does Tammy say back there?
I'm sorry, I think in fairness to the brick and mortar businesses, I think $30 for a year is very inexpensive to operate a business.
What do brick and mortar pay?
We pay $32.50, but we pay, as business owners, we or they, however you want to put me right now, they pay a lot more into all the overhead that goes along with city expenses. So, these people will be using city lights, city utilities, they're going to be using our city streets. I think that it's just a cost of doing business. I don't think that $100 a quarter would maybe even be too little. I was thinking $250 for the year would not be too little at all. So they're going to make that. Some of these businesses are going to make that in a day. So.
Yeah,
And they don't get to use city utilities. I think that's in here.
where
Why don't you talk like street lights?
I interpret that this permit is on top of the city business license.
All right. Good.
So we'll have the
$32.50.
$32.50, which is very cheap for a business license, but they have to get that plus this permit.
Sure.
Yes. Yeah, and I don't know if we want to discourage people who might want to participate for like one day out of the whole year.
Well, that's what
Well,
the
Maybe there should be a
one.
one-time permit, and then there should be a year permit, and then like you say, you prorate it depending on when you come.
But the other ball, to me, is involved is, we could make this an annual fee, because then who's gonna check up to see if they're here once a month, once a week? 10 times the first quarter, that's 13 times in a quarter. Who's gonna police that to see that they're here doing it? And that's gonna cost manpower too. So I think, like Susan said, for just the permit, the business license is separate, maybe it should be $50, but put it on an annual basis. If they wanna come 52 weeks in a year, they're covered. If they wanna come 13 times in a year, they're covered. But we don't have to police when they are going to be here.
Can Dave look at other towns and see how they do it, or is?
Certainly. Maybe put some options in there for review next time.
That would be nice.
Yeah, I agree. I think it should be an annual fee instead of a quarter.
One thing.
Whatever you
Maybe 200
determine,
a year.
that fee to be, but I think it should be annual.
One thing caught my eye on here as questionable is, it's on page 1, in the small print underneath section 670.020, like the second sentence, I don't agree with that where it says, a food truck vendor who desires to operate a food truck on city street, parking lot, or other city property. I don't want the food trucks on city
During a
street.
festival,
that's-
during a festival like my fest.
But any,
Well, they close off City Street, Folks Spots and stuff, they already do that.
Because it says during a festival or special event. So like if they have the car show.
may do so during a festival, special event.
And they'd have to do a special use.
So if they have the
application.
car show for the Fords, they might have a food
That part I
truck.
can understand.
So that's what that's saying, if I read that right.
Okay.
And then, say we wanted to do like in the summer, maybe the first Friday of the month or something, since there's Art Walk, maybe the first Friday of the month, we could have Friday nights food trucks in the park or something, and our families could come and they could enjoy the food trucks. Can they do that in the park?
Sure.
Again, through the special
Well, it's
event.
And
Yeah.
usually events like that have a sponsor, you know, and
Yeah.
then the sponsor could apply for a special event permit and set forth all the,
Like, so maybe like
Features or-
Lions or JC's or somebody would want to do something like that. Just so we have something for our community people to do too.
So how would that process be affected during Oktoberfest and MyFest? Those would be two festivals, right?
I don't think any different, except that it's, on top of everything else, they have to get that $10 vendor space permit.
Notice something else, I know Tricia sent a message reference that the county health does not issue a food permit, but they do have to be inspected. So that's, I'm thinking that they need a county health department inspection sign off that they have been inspected. Which I hadn't seen that in there.
I think they've
Okay,
worked
please.
that into their.
It's on, under B number 3, isn't it?
The proposed resolution must.
It just says if they've been
Has been
inspected, they
inspected.
have to apply.
Has been inspected. A copy of the inspection report shall be provided.
If it has been inspected. If it hasn't been inspected, then they're still allowed to participate.
well, I don't know the food truck business very well, but if I'm a brand new food truck, and I'm coming on, and I want a permit to start on April 1st, and I come in and I fill out my application on March the 10th, maybe I haven't been inspected yet by the county. And so, you know, I guess we could look into or talk to the county if somebody comes and contacts them on March the 10th, or do they run out and inspect real quick in the next 20 days, or they just when they get around to it? I think the intent was to not necessarily hold somebody up because the county hasn't come and inspected them yet, but if and when they do, well, then we want a copy of the report.
And then are you talking
But I'm all
inspecting them before each time they come?
Well, no, I just, because it was.
Or an annual.
A current, I mean,
A current.
I'm sure they're inspected once a year, but
I mean,
I don't know if it's on a yearly basis, or, I know that when Greg Laura was still here, they have a different criteria they use for vending. Basically, it's on food product handling.
Well, it's like buses and cars get inspected. I mean, it's a vehicle, right?
Well, I don't know, I mean, you might have somebody that has a food truck, and the only time they use their food truck is in Hermann, Missouri, 9 days a year, in May and October, and maybe once during the summer. I'm not quite sure how inspections work for people like that, but
maybe we need to find out.
The cleaning of the cooking utensils, the temperature of the oil, if they use grease, water disposal services.
But that's why the county health department.
Yes, and then that's what we're talking
If you
about.
look on
We can't-
page
Why are we
3,
policing that? is
on
what
page
I'm
Because then they can't operate unless they have that.
and
But
on
we
page
won't
3 it
issue them a
talks about
city license
cleanliness.
if they haven't been inspected.
I'll check into the a few scenarios and if and how the county would actually inspect, what they provide when they did.
I have one more
And-
thing.
I'm sorry, before we move on from that, I did talk to the gentleman at the health department, and he did say, Dave, if we needed him to actually, he'd come to a meeting, he'd be willing to do that and answer our questions too, if we don't get to the bottom of what
Perfect.
we're looking for. So.
Mayor, I think you might have a comment or two in the.
I have a question though, yeah, one more thing. When you look on page 3I, it says no storage area, water, electric, or other utility will be supplied by the city. Do we need to be point blank and say trash disposal? Since we're saying up above that you can't use our trash cans along the streets and drains along the streets, do we need to say something there in I?
I think we say somewhere else that the trash needs to be picked up and it needs to be cleaned.
Yeah, I read that somewhere.
Okay, that's under G.
Section G.
Okay.
Yeah, G.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, any other discussion up here?
Good evening. My name is Mark Piontek. I'm an attorney in Washington, Missouri. I'm also the city attorney in Washington and a few other places. And my understanding is this food truck ordinance started, at least in part, with the food truck ordinance that the city of Washington adopted a few years ago, and I had a hand in drafting that. I didn't do all of it, but I'm somewhat familiar with it. I represent Jordan and Stacy Lampkin, who own some property here in downtown Hermann. They have property or a vacant lot next to the building where they have had some interest in operating a food truck, not themselves, but another company coming in and operating a food truck. The building that they just recently purchased has been vacant, I'm told, since about 2017. They have plans to put or they have someone who's interested in putting a tap room into that building. The operator of that tap room does not plan to have food service, and that's why they're interested in, as well, in having the food truck in the parking lot next to the tap room. It'll provide complimentary food for the refreshments that are going on in the tap room. So it's an important part of the business, not only to rent the property to the tap room, but also make it enticing for them to locate there by being able to have a food truck next door. I've read, and Dave was kind enough to share several different drafts of this food truck ordinance once we became aware it was being considered. He was kind enough to share some versions of it, and we submitted some comments and some questions to him and some proposed changes to him, and my understanding is some of those got incorporated already in what you have before you tonight. From the initial draft that I saw, and even in the current draft that's before you tonight, it appears that it is being written not so much to protect the public, but to protect other restaurants that are already located here. And if that's the case, that's really not the purpose of the city of Hermann, is to pick winners and losers. Who's gonna win, who's gonna lose? If you're gonna operate a food truck, we don't want you here, we don't want your business here. We want to protect the brick and mortar restaurants. I don't really think that's what anybody's intention is, but that's what some of this language in the proposed ordinance will have the effect of doing. I reached out, there's an organization called the American Planning Association, which is probably the premier planning organization in the United States for planning professionals. And there's some language in a document produced by the planning organization, or the Planning Association, and let me read just a short bit of it. Mobile food vending, or food trucks, is increasingly being recognized as a community economic development tool. Food trucks, trailers, and carts provide opportunities for entrepreneurs and small businesses and add interest, vibrancy, and activity to streetscapes and sites, and expand food access in areas underserved by traditional restaurants. So according to the American Planning Association, it's not viewed as, food trucks are not viewed as a threat to existing business, but as complementary to existing business, existing restaurants. There's an old saying I learned long time ago: a rising tide lifts all boats. If you can bring more business in, more people in, whether they're coming in to visit the food trucks, you bring those people in, they'll visit your other shops, your other stores, your restaurants, your bars, whatever the other activities are that are going on here. More people is better than less. It's more vibrant to the community, it's more vibrant to your downtown and to your current businesses. We have some concerns about the proposed ordinance. We're not opposed to some reasonable regulation, but we are opposed to some of this regulation. And if I could point out just a couple of things. This ordinance only applies to private property. You're purporting to regulate a business use of private property. That's something that is typically done through the zoning code and not as a means of licensing. So as an initial point, in my view at least, as an attorney and as a city attorney, these regulations, if you're going to regulate private property use, those have to be done as part of the zoning code, which requires the public hearings and all of that process as though you're amending your code. On the second page of your proposed ordinance, B2, it says that you have to provide in the application the proposed location for the food truck. So if I submit an application for a food truck, and I apologize, I don't know the addresses here, so I'll pick a number. I apply for a food truck at 100 Main Street, and I get my permit. And 100 Main Street turns out to be not a great location. Can I move my food truck down the street to 300 Main Street? Or do I have to come back and apply for another permit? Is that permit only good for that particular location? Or can I go anywhere once I have that permit that's been issued? That's not clear. Secondly, it says we have to provide the name, phone number, email, and mailing addresses of the food truck vendor. If I change my email address, does that mean my permit is no longer valid? If I move, I sell my house, I rent an apartment, is that food truck permit no longer valid because I've changed addresses? Again, that's not clear. Proof of liability insurance coverage in an amount not less than $1 million. Do you require other restaurants or businesses in the city of Hermann to provide you with liability insurance at all, in any amount? My guess is you don't. Yet somebody can walk into a grocery store, slip on a wet floor, and hurt themselves. I mean, Dave knows, lawyers handle slip and fall cases. There's a term for it, slip and fall cases. Do we require, as a city, do you require that grocery store to provide you with proof that they have $1 million worth of liability insurance? As a food truck, it's a motor vehicle. They already have to provide liability insurance to operate on the roads, but it's not $1 million. Are you trying to grant the local brick and mortar restaurants an advantage over what these food and truck vendors are required to do? Fundamentally, they're selling food. Why $1 million for a food truck and not $1 million for a restaurant? Under number 8, B8, the desired duration for the food truck permit. Permits may be issued for up to 1 year. Is it a 1-year permit? Is it a 6-month permit? Is it a 30-day permit? A 2-week permit? It's not at all clear what that means. Now, number 9, a description of the food that will be offered for sale. So if I submit an application to run a food truck to sell burritos, as the mayor mentioned, and I'm in the burrito business for a while and they're not selling. Either they're bad burritos or people don't like burritos, I don't know. And they decide, I want hamburgers, or I want deli sandwiches, or I want shish kebabs, or whatever. Do I have to come in and apply for a new permit because I changed my menu? Again, it's not clear, it's ambiguous. So, I mean, can I put anything I want down on the permit application? Say I'm going to have hamburgers, I'm going to have steaks, I'm going to have pizza, I'm going to sell, you know, what comprehensive list do I have to give you to be able to satisfy that requirement? On the page 3 at the top, line 13, this is the one that really concerns me. Any additional information required by the city clerk to ensure the requirements of this chapter are met. What is that? How do I know as an applicant what I have to provide? And what guidance is given to the city clerk for him or her, and I apologize, I don't know which, him or her to know what they can ask for in order to determine whether these conditions are met? Does the city clerk have unfettered discretion to pick and choose whatever they want to ask for? There's absolutely no guidance here. There's some law in Missouri that says if you're granting discretion to an administrative official like a city clerk, you have to provide guidance to that city clerk as to what information they're supposed to rely on. And that's not here. That's totally lacking. There are some other problems with the ordinance, but I think I've kind of hit the highlights. As I said, we're not opposed to regulation in its entirety. We're just opposed to unreasonable regulation. We would be more than happy to sit down with whomever from the city, whether it's Dave or whomever you think is appropriate, and work together to come up with an ordinance that's reasonable for everybody. Thanks, and I'll take any questions anybody may have.
Any questions?
Where did that $1 million liability come
It just came from another sample ordinance, so
from? Whose ordinance?
I don't recall.
It's not the city of Washington.
Well, that was what I was gonna ask you. You wrote that ordinance, and that's one of the ones he's got it from.
It's not there.
One thing you mentioned there about using the similarity of 100 Main Street, the business was slow, you want to move to 300 block of Main Street. Well, number one, won't be allowed on this street unless that street's closed.
Well, if there's a vacant lot at 100 Main Street, and there's another vacant lot at 300 Main Street, and I work out a deal with the owners of both
And
properties,
that's covered in there.
and I say, well, I submit, but your ordinance says I have to give you the location. So I put on my application 100 Main Street, and I'm there for a month, and I figured, there's nobody coming by here. There's no traffic, but I see it down the street, a lot of people. So I've got a vacant lot down there, I'm renting that from the owner, and I want to move my food truck down there. Do I have to come in and apply for a new permit? Because I got a different address than the one that was on the application.
My assumption, and of course you know what assuming does, but upon noticing that you was paying rent at 100 block, business was bad, but you have approval from John Doe to use his parking lot, signed paper, you come in and just give that to the city, you wouldn't have to apply for a new permit, it's just relocating. Because I feel the city needs to know where those trucks are, so we can check them to make sure they are legit, and do they have a proper license to operate?
Well, I mean, your ordinance says that they have to post the license on the outside of the truck. So if somebody walks by or drives by, or the police department runs by and says, hey, I don't see a license here, they're not licensed. So I don't see that that's even gonna be an issue to try to determine whether or not they're even licensed. If, you know, and maybe I rent both properties, and on Friday night, I wanna be over here at 100 Main Street, and on Saturday night, I wanna be over here at 300 Main Street. So every time I move, I have to come back to City Hall and provide more information about, you know, I'm moving every other day.
I think that this number 2 that you talked about, and the name, number, address, 2-4, I think those are all easy things that we can fix. I mean, we're not gonna be saying you have to stay at this spot and you have to do this and that. I think the city is pretty easy to work with, and that this is something we can work through.
And it doesn't say exact location, it said proposed location. I'm not a lawyer, but I mean,
As
that
a
doesn't
lawyer,
really
when
sound to me like that's anchoring you to one spot.
as a lawyer, when I read proposed location, that means I'm proposing to be on this spot, and that's where I have to include in my application.
So what would you recommend adding to this for flexibility in that?
I'd be happy to work with the city attorney on that, but I would eliminate a fair amount of this. I mean, you know, if you, and I don't know if you started with Washington's ordinance or you considered parts of it, A lot of it has to do more with safety issues. You know, if you're gonna have propane, it's gotta be, you know, in this facility, or it's gotta be this far from whatever. A lot of it was more safety-oriented issues, rather than, we wanna know your mailing address, your email address, your name and address and phone number. We wanna know
I
that you
think
have
those are
$1
safety
million.
things, because what if you get food poisoning? And you're like, well, where are these people? I want to turn them into the health department because I got food poisoning. I think
And also,
that's
we have that
amazing.
information from the regular businesses around town. We have their name, address, phone number.
Well, just
all
about
that.
any permit
I was
application,
gonna
you're
say.
gonna state your name and address and your phone number.
I don't think that's unreasonable.
So when I change addresses, when I sell my house, do I have to come in and apply for a new permit?
Oh, you come in and tell them you change your address, called the change of address card.
I think we need to let Dave work on it some more, and then we.
Oh,
talk about it
absolutely.
again
We
the
weren't
next time.
voting on anything tonight. The whole
Yeah.
idea, this is a draft.
Yeah, open for discussion, and you had some good points in there. But then, like I said, I think that the change of location as a city, you have to be on private property. And how do we know you would have permission at the 300 block from that property owner? Then we get a phone call to send our police officers down there because we have trespassers.
How do you know anybody has permission to be on somebody else's property?
Well,
You don't.
If we get a
Well, we
complaint,
do
then
if
we
they're
go.
running a business on it. We keep track of that.
Do you? I mean, if
As far as I know.
somebody brings in a produce truck, you know, a farmer's truck into town, and they're selling watermelons off of somebody's parking lot, do you know who they are? Do you
Oh,
know?
I get a lot of phone calls about that, sir.
Well,
And I send the police to check on it.
and you can do the same thing for food trucks that are operating on somebody's property without permission. I suggest to you
I already
that
have.
it's pretty rare, it's gonna be the pretty rare situation where that occurs. For one thing, you can't hide these food trucks. I don't know if you've seen them, they're pretty colorful, most of them, and it's pretty obvious where they are. Unless you're hiding it in an alley somewhere, and then you're gonna see a line of people there, but you can't really hide these things.
And safety-wise, I think we need to look at distance between food trucks because of propane or however they're heating their food or whatever. So I think, and we talked about that a little while ago, that we need to look at that.
Okay.
Mark, are you prepared to talk about alcohol and what your client's position is on that and sales of?
At the current time, my client is not gonna operate the food truck. They're leasing the property the food truck operator. And it's my understanding at present, the food truck operator has no intention of selling alcohol because they're located right next door to the tap room. The tap room is gonna sell alcohol, and they're not trying to compete with each other. They're trying to complement each other.
one other thing you mentioned, I know we want to move on here, that you feel like this kind of goes against the food truck industry in protecting the brick and mortar stores. What I want is to put them both on the same page. If we expect our brick and mortar stores to have all this, the county inspections, the business license, boom, 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 then the food truck needs that.
And I have no objection to any of that.
So we're not
No.
treating them or trying to alienate the food trucks from the brick and mortar.
And I have no objection, and I think my client, and I can ask, but I think my client would wholeheartedly agree with that. If you want to apply the very same regulations that apply to brick and mortar restaurants to food trucks, I don't think we have an argument. We have no problem with that. We'd go along with that today, tomorrow, and all next week.
The reason I said that, because you kind of indicated what you read there was we were alienating the food trucks.
That's what it appears to me, that you're creating obstacles for food trucks to come in and do business here in the city. And
That is not the
these aren't
intent.
necessarily, these aren't always gonna be food trucks from outside the community. There may be local people who wanna operate.
Well, there's a couple of them sitting right behind you.
Well, good on them. I hope they do, and I hope they're successful. I've seen how these things operate in some other communities. The city of Washington adopted an ordinance because prior to that ordinance, these things pretty much weren't allowed. They were allowed on a very short-term basis, and that was about it, because it was under our general zoning code, which didn't allow them. So they adopted this ordinance to encourage these things, not to discourage them, but to encourage them. And I don't know about Dave, Dave's probably around more than I am, but I don't see them around at all. Now, maybe they're there and I just don't see them, but apparently we're still not doing something right to get these things in there, but.
I think
I can see it
Washington
could be
has a
great.
specific zone where the food trucks are allowed to, down by the farmer's market area.
Yeah,
down by First Street.
there's something in the code that talks about they have to
That's
be in
the
a
only
vending
place they
district,
can
but
be.
the city can designate these vending districts. You can't have them in a residential zone, but.
Well, Washington also has the ability to shut off that whole section of town down there to motor traffic and allow food trucks in there. We don't have that here. We have to keep them off the streets. We need that area for parking and other things.
Well, and again, if that would seem to me to be something that would encourage them to do business there, but it doesn't seem to work. I don't see many, if any of them there. And there's one guy I've seen around, he does the cheesesteaks guy, but,
Daddy-O's?
yeah.
Good
I thought,
food.
very good.
Good food, by the way.
Hot Dog Man was probably before Washington's work, 'cause that might have been part of
Yeah,
what-
that's right,
what
that's right.
brought it all up, is a guy just stationed himself at strategic places around town, and brick and mortar restaurants would complain.
Okay. All right,
Thank you for your
thank you
time.
for your input, we appreciate you being here.
You bet.
Okay, so
We'll
Gary,
continue to talk. and-
continue for the next meeting?
Might as well. See if we can come up with.
You okay with that, everybody? Okay, any other old business?
I have something.
Yes, ma'am.
We talked, I think at the last meeting, we had Marlon talk about dogs on the loose. And I just want to stress again that if your dog is picked up, you will be fined. The city license for a dog is $1. It's not that big of a deal, but if your dog bites somebody, it's going to be picked up and you're going to be fined, and whoever that dog bites, that person might get upset. So please start thinking about keeping control of your pets. I myself last week was almost bit by a dog, and there was no way I could catch it so that the police could come and get it because I had to pick a stick up. I was afraid it was going to get me. So just get your dog license, keep your dog in control, and
On a leash.
yeah, on a leash. Don't let them run wild to go out because it was all over the place.
Okay. Dave, did you have something?
Yes, just one thing, old business, because I've mentioned it here before. We have a flag ceremony this Thursday, the 17th at 1:25 p.m. for the deceased veteran, Merrill Field or File. Do you know?
I say fetal.
Okay. He was in the U.S. Navy. It's something the city does in partnership with private people. It's a great deal. The entire community is welcome and encouraged to come out and help honor those who serve.
All right, very good. Any other old business? New business? Okay, we'll move on to motions. I motion to approve the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Motion made and second, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
So carried. Invoices for payment.
Move we pay the bill.
Motion's been made to pay the bills. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Pay the bills. Carried. Approved purchase of the new International Tandem Dump Truck at state bid price of $147,766.35 from Shepherd's International Truck Center. This is in the budget. This will be shared by all the departments, or most of the departments.
And it's cheaper than what was budgeted.
And it was
too.
roughly $25,000 under budget.
I move to approve on the Public Works Director's recommendation.
Motion's been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. Approve a bid from Gray Bar for purchase of park lighting. This is part of the lighting phase that they've been working on for a couple of years now. Do I have a motion to approve
Make
that?
a motion to approve the purchase of park lighting.
Motion's been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. Amend the municipal service agreement with Michael Fleege for building inspecting services. Do you all understand what's going on there with
It was the liability insurance.
the workman's comp insurance and by Myrna? This has to be part of, anyway, it's a reimbursement basically.
Yeah, that was an oversight on our, on the city's side. And so, yes, so between New Haven and us and Michael himself, all agreed to split that cost 3 ways this year.
Okay.
I move to approve the changes to the code.
Motion been made, a second?
Second.
Second, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. Hire Lara Christie as an assistant pool manager for the 2022 season.
Motion approved.
Motion's made, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made and second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. Vehicle for hire license, Arminius Holdings LLC doing business as Crown Suites.
Move to approve.
I have a motion to approve, do I have a second?
A second?
Motion's made and second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. Reappoint Thomas Greasy Dick to the Tree Commission.
I move to reappoint Elizabeth.
Motion been made, second.
Second.
Motion made and second, all in favor aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. No reports. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion's been made, do I have a second?
Second?
Motion made and second. All in favor aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you everyone for coming. Happy Valentine's Day.
Did you get stuff to keep you out?